The gavel boomed like thunder through the hushed courtroom. Bang! The air thickened, electric, with the charge of all the broken vows, betrayals, and suffering. They all knew that in that room, this wasn't any ordinary court hearing. This was the accounting of a man who made his reputation on love, family, and religion, but ruined it with pride, arrogance, and bias. Kody Brown, the erstwhile patriarch of TLC's Sister Wives, sat in the defendant's chair, his face ashen, his jaw clenched. Cameras recorded every spasm. His wives, no, his ex-wives, sat a mere few feet away. Christine, Janelle, Meri. They had lived for years with humiliation, abandonment, and broken vows. But today, they were not wives. They were not supporting actors in Kody's drama. They were warriors, survivors. And above all, they were about to triumph. The air was so charged, you could cut it with a blade. Journalists wrote furiously in notebooks. Spectators who had watched the family's highs and lows for more than a decade leaned forward in chairs. The court was not merely about dividing assets or signing papers. It was about being held accountable. It was about a man who believed he could dictate everything finally being held accountable. And as the judge lifted her gaze from the documents on her desk, clearing her throat before she delivered the verdict, the courtroom came to a standstill. But to realize why this moment was an earthquake, you need to go back. You need to realize the years of hurt that led to this family here. America viewed the Browns on TV for over a decade. They smiled in front of cameras, displayed their big family, and promoted the beauty of having many wives. Kody informed the world it was all about love, oneness, and for a greater purpose. He articulated with charm, with conviction. And for some time, others bought it. But behind the lenses, the cracks began to appear. Christine would cry herself to bed, feeling unwanted and unseen, while Kody devoted his attention to Robin. Janelle worked hard to provide for the family, investing money into houses and businesses, only to find herself stranded financially when Kody wouldn't commit to his word. And Meri, Kody's former legal wife, was cast aside like a throwaway when Kody divorced her so he could marry Robin legally. For years, Meri clung, hoping for scraps of love, until even she couldn't help but know the truth. Kody was never returning. The Sister Wives' dream had imploded. What was meant to be a tale of togetherness had turned into a tale of favorites and domination. And when Christine left in 2021, it was the match that ignited everything. Janelle left soon afterward. Then Meri joined her. But departure was not enough. For behind the heartache lay years of money fights, properties such as Coyote Pass, bank accounts, debts, and investments with no answers. Who owed what? Who had given up what? And who had lost everything? The women knew they were not just emotionally shattered. They had been financially cheated as well. That's when they brought the fight to court. Within the courtroom, the theatrics were like something from a movie. Christine got to speak first. Her voice shaking occasionally, but with determination, she presented a picture of evenings spent going unnoticed. Children pleading for the attention of their father only to be ignored. She presented receipts, papers, evidence that she had invested money into real estate and properties Kody now owned. Janelle trailed behind, serene but resolute. She testified of her sacrifices, of how she toiled to keep the family on even keel as Kody pursued dreams and pet wants. She described to the court how she invested in real estate that Kody now sought to usurp. Her testimony was not incendiary, yet it was cutting, penetrating through Kody's narrative of victimhood. And then appeared Meri. For years she had been the quiet one, reputed to be weak or overlooked. But when she got up in that courtroom, she was silent no longer. Her testimony was crushing. She spoke of years of emotional deprivation, of being left hanging while Kody openly proclaimed to the world he did not love her anymore. She reminded the court that she had sacrificed decades of her life, her heart and money to this family, only to be degraded and cast aside. The courtroom heard. And then Kody spoke. He yelled, he flailed his arms. He protested that he was the victim, that his wives had turned against him unjustly, that they were jealous and bitter. He protested that he had taken care of them, that he had suffered too. But the louder he yelled, the more everyone could see the truth. His pride, his arrogance, his inability to admit a mistake. It wasn't strength, it was desperation. And then the judge's voice rang out. Her tone was biting, immovable, reminiscent of the sound of the gavel itself. Kody Brown, she stated firmly, what I see here is not a man of unity, but a man of manipulation. I see a pattern of economic neglect, emotional abuse, and betrayal. These women trusted you. They constructed their lives around you, and you shattered that trust. Gasps were heard throughout the courtroom. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face losing color. The judge went on, this court finds in favor of Christine Brown, Janelle Brown, and Meri Brown. They shall receive rightful ownership of their common properties and monetary payment for the years of unpaid labor. Mr. Brown, you will have no more claim over these assets. Words came like hammers. Christine's tears streamed down, but they were relief tears. Janelle tightened her grip, her face a mask of triumph. Meri pulled herself upright, her dignity intact, and Kody, he sat transfixed, his kingdom crumbling beneath him. As the gavel came down for the last time, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Supporters embraced the wives, reporters scrambled to get every detail. Cameras flashed, capturing Christine's smile, Janelle's sigh of relief, Meri's proud walk out of the courtroom. Kody walked out alone. No wives, no allies, no power, just the crushing reality of defeat. For viewers, this was not simply a verdict. It was justice. Decades of seeing the women pain, decades of seeing Kody shirk responsibility, had finally ended. The verdict wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. Christine had moved on, and was happy with David Woolley. Janelle was independent once more. Meri had restored her dignity, and as a group, they demonstrated something strong. They weren't merely survivors of Kody Brown's kingdom, they were winners. And Kody, he was the cautionary tale. The fellow who had everything, wives, popularity, children, real estate, losing it all due to pride and favoritism. That is why the courtroom gavel didn't just close a case. It closed a chapter in reality television history. It ended the myth of the perfect polygamist family. And it gave Christine, Janelle, and Meri the justice they had been denied for so long. Because in the end, the judge didn't just destroy Kody Brown's claims. She gave the women freedom. She gave them closure. She gave them victory. And that's why this moment will always be remembered, not only as a court decision, but as the day Kody Brown's empire fell, and the sister wives once and for all walked away. Free, bang. The loud, sharp report of the gavel cracked the air like thunder. It wasn't the sound of wood hitting wood. It was the sound of years of betrayal coming crashing down all at once. The whole courtroom stood still. The air was thick and heavy, with anticipation, as if the walls of the courthouse knew the history, the heartache and the anger that had brought this family to this place. Kody Brown sat at the defendant's table, his jaw set in stone, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. He had the same smug grin he used to share with television screens all over America, but it was fading. His gaze flicked, not at the judge, but at the three women before him, women who had once been his wife. Women who had once based their lives on his words. Women who no longer spoke in hushed tones. Christine, Janelle, Meri, they sat together in a row, shoulders straight, their faces a mixture of fatigue and resolve. They weren't sitting here as sister wives anymore. They weren't here as the silent background characters in the Kody Brown saga. They were here as warriors, battered, bruised, but unbowed. And every single person in that courtroom, from the journalists frantically writing on their pads to the fans on the precipice of their seats, knew one thing. This was the moment that would make all things make sense. This wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't about faith. It wasn't even about marriage. This was about justice. The voice of the judge boomed out, demanding silence. Her gaze cut around the room, firm, unyielding. She gazed at the man standing before her, the man who had made his fortune on the concept of unity and family, and then allowed it to fall apart in the most public, humiliating fashion conceivable. And then she gazed at the women, each of them bearing years of tales, of tears, of heartache etched on the lines of their faces. To everyone else, this may have seemed a shock. To the Brown family, though, it was the culmination of a long journey. A journey of broken trust, shattered promises, and hurt that cut deeper than any camera could ever expose. Let us go back for a moment, for to grasp the silence that hung suspended in that courtroom, you must grasp the years that brought us to this day. When Sister Wives originally aired, it was a picture of something strange, something revolutionary. A family living in polygamy, attempting to prove the world that love might be shared, that harmony might be found through multiple marriages. Kody Brown was at the forefront of it all, the affable, grinning patriarch with flowing locks and words that flowed like honey from his tongue. He vowed his wives equality, attention and affection. He explained to viewers that he was constructing something holy, and people believed it. For a while, the Browns were captivating, even inspiring. But gradually flaws crept into the facade. Christine would often be the first to exhibit her hurt. On television she attempted to smile, but in her eyes you could sense the isolation. She wept in secret, being unwanted, unnoticed, as though her union was getting away from her. And Kody's focus was increasingly directed towards Robin. Janelle was the behind-the-scenes worker, the one who paid the financial bills, the one who sacrificed quietly. She invested in real estate, invested in family businesses, thinking one day it would all be worth it. But what happened instead was that she sat by as her work was overlooked, her opinion silenced by Kody's ego and favoritism. And then there was Meri, once the legal wife of Kody, the woman who had assisted in bringing this family into the limelight. But Kody left her to marry Robin legally, saying it was purely for legal reasons, only to adopt Robin's kids. With time his words became colder, bitter until one day, on film he confessed he no longer loved her. The embarrassment was public, raw, and irreversible. By the time Christine departed in 2021, the cracks were full-blown earthquakes. She moved out, took her kids, and left behind the dream of plural marriage. It was a shock to viewers, but to her, it was survival. Janelle soon followed, coming to the realization that she too had been emotionally abandoned and financially spent. She did not want to continue to live in a marriage where her sacrifices were worthless. And Meri, although she struggled for years to cling on, finally released when it was evident that Kody had driven her out, not only emotionally, but spiritually. The family who had claimed to be united was now divided beyond salvation. And yet, it wasn't enough to simply walk away, because behind all the broken hearts and dissolved marriages were years of muddled finances, title deeds in dispute, and outstanding questions. Who owned Coyote Pass? Who paid for what? And who had been left with nothing? That's when the women understood this wasn't personal anymore. It was legal, and the only way that they could ever get free was through the courts. Which brings us back here to this silent, heavy courtroom. The walls themselves drank in the tension. Each cough, each rustle of paper, each soft murmur echoed like thunder. Outdoors, cameras flashed, reporters stood ready, fans congregated to wait and see what would transpire. Indoors, all gazes were fixed on the judge, now set to read the words that would break what little remained of Kody Brown's grip. But for a moment, before she could utter a word, she stopped, her gaze resting on Kody. And at that instant, the world witnessed the truth. The self-assured patriarch who had marched across TV screens was a cornered man now, laid bare. His wives, his equals were not standing beside him anymore. His children, some of whom had complained of his favoritism and abandonment, were not here to defend him. Even Robin, the sole wife, sat rigid in the back, her face ashen, her lips clamped together in fear. Kody Brown stood alone. The judge cleared his throat, and the room suspended its breath. The burden of over a decade weighed heavily upon all. Decades of sacrifice, of arguments, of tearful nights, of shattered promises, all of it culminated here. This wasn't just another divorce. It wasn't just a fight over property. It was a public settling of scores. A trial in which the world would finally witness, in black and white, who had been wronged and who was to be blamed. Christine's eyes glistened with tears, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Janelle leaned forward, her jaw tight, her gaze locked on the judge. Meri sat straighter, her chin lifted, as though bracing for the storm. And Kody, he fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat, his smirk erased, his expression pulled tight with anger and fear. He was hoping to be able to blag this one, like he'd done every other time. But he knew, deep down, this was different. And that's where our story really starts. With the crash of the gavel, with the burden of silence, and with the eyes of the world upon one man as he stood before the judgment of years of decisions. Because this wasn't merely the trial of Kody Brown. The gavel had fallen, the judge had settled in. But in order to grasp fully the gravity of this courtroom battle, we must turn the clock back. We must strip away the veil of history, the years of sorrow, and the betrayals which propelled the Brown family to this moment. Since what appeared on paper to be a straightforward court case was, in reality, the culmination of more than 10 years of hurts that never healed. When Sister Wives first hit the airwaves, the world was intrigued. The Browns were a family unlike any family most had ever known. Kody Brown towered above the fray, unapologetic about his existence, unapologetic about his decisions, and unapologetic about what he referred to as his big picture vision. He was more than a husband. He was a leader. At least, that's the picture he wanted the world to paint. 4 wives, 18 kids. A large family, he said, was based on unity, faith, and love. That image sold for years. People watched, wondering how a polygamous family actually functioned. TLC cameras filmed laughter, meals, vacations, and family councils. But behind the smiles, behind the posed family photos, something sinister was brewing. Christine was among the first to sense it. In the beginning, she did believe in the dream. She gave Kody her youth, her loyalty, her trust. She cooked dinners, raised children, and tried to convince herself she was really loved. But cracks started to appear. Slowly she began to understand she wasn't his first priority. The love she deserved was drifting away. She stood by, while Kody's focus centered increasingly on Robyn, the youngest wife, the newest of them all, the one who seemed to steal the spotlight, both at home and on television. Christine wept in secret, concealing tears from her children, attempting to maintain her dignity in front of cameras. But in her heart, she knew. She was no longer noticed, no longer loved. Janelle's tale was not the same, yet no less sorrowful. She was not the most sentimental wife. Practical, stable. She was the glue that kept the family together financially. Kody may have dreamed big, but Janelle paid the bills, worked crazy hours, and invested in the family's endeavors such as land and real estate. She wanted to build something for the future. She believed Kody when he promised the investments would be shared with everyone, that someday the sacrifices would be worth it. But over the years, Janelle began to realize the truth. Her input wasn't valued. Her sacrifices weren't appreciated. Kody's financial priorities seemed to turn to Robyn and her kids, while Janelle's devotion was assumed. And then there was Meri, the original wife, the one who legally committed to Kody from the start of their tale. She was the anchor, the wife who gave the dream legitimacy. But then came 2014, and Kody requested something out of the blue from Meri. He requested a divorce from her. He said it wasn't about her. It was merely about legally doing it so he could marry Robyn and adopt her 3 children. Meri consented, believing that their emotional connection would not waver, but it did not. Instead, the divorce became a permanent wound. Kody grew colder, his words sharper, until eventually in front of cameras and the world, he declared that he no longer loved Meri, that he didn't even consider himself married to her anymore. It was a humiliation so deep, so public, that fans gasped. Meri's eyes told the story. Years of devotion dismissed in an instant. This was the pattern. Christine's heart left empty. Janelle's finances drained. Meri's dignity destroyed. And yet for years, they stayed. They tried. They endured. Because leaving meant breaking apart, not just a marriage, but an entire world. But slowly, one by one, they began to realize they had to save themselves. Christine was the first to break free. In 2021, she packed her bags, loaded up her children, and said the words no one thought she'd ever say: "I'm leaving." It was a turning point for the family and for the show. Fans were shocked, but Christine had reached her limit. She could no longer pretend. She wanted love, not scraps. She wanted respect, not favoritism. She wanted freedom, and she took it. Her departure wasn't silent. It was loud, public, and without apology. and it empowered the rest. Janelle also followed suit. She didn't make a big deal of it, but her breakup was strong in its own right. She had been the rock, the reliable one, the wife who didn't request much. But she couldn't continue to see her financial investments go down the drain into Kody's pocket while she received nothing. To all her love wasn't about it. It was about equity. And when she found out Kody would never realize her value, she walked as well. Meri, however, was different. She clung longer than anyone. She held on, even after being shamed, hoping somehow, some way, that she might be able to rebuild. But when Kody publicly disclosed he had no love for her, that the marriage was dead, she finally realized the truth. And so she too left. By 2023, the family was broken. The dream was lost. The wives had departed. And Kody was left alone with Robyn. But even then, the wounds were not mended. Because although the emotional wars had been waged in front of the cameras, the money wars were still hiding in the background. Coyote Pass, the land that was to be the future of the family. A sprawling piece of land in Arizona that had been intended to represent unity. A new beginning. A dream to build homes side by side. All the wives had put in. All the wives had invested. All the wives had sacrificed to make it happen. And when the family broke down, so did the dream. Suddenly, no one knew who owned it. Suddenly, questions began. Who actually paid? Who owned what? And who was due to own the land? Now, it wasn't only Coyote Pass. There were also years of shared finances, debt, and contributions that had never been fairly accounted for. Money had been commingled, spent, and transferred without disclosure. Christine claimed she had contributed more than she received. Janelle insisted her investments were being deleted. Meri believed she had been left with nothing. It was an economic mess, as complicated as the emotional one. And that's when they caught on. This wasn't simply about walking away. This was about standing up for themselves. If they didn't fight, Kody would just walk away with it all, leaving them with just scars. So they decided. They went to court, and this is where the betrayal hurts all the more. Because the court case wasn't merely about figures. It was about revealing what actually took place in the background. It was about sharing their stories, not in hushed tones, not in secret chambers, but in a courtroom before a judge, while on oath, where the truth must be told. Christine would discuss nights of tears alone, of children asking why their father didn't love them. Janelle would outline her sacrifices financially, her labor, her trust betrayed. Meri would relate the tale of humiliation, of displacement, of being left legally and emotionally abandoned. And Kody, he would retaliate, loud, furious, angry. He would say he gave his all, that his wives turned on him for jealousy. But the louder he yelled, the more the world could see what was real. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't bitterness. This was betrayal. Years and years of it. And now all of it was being exposed in a courtroom with the whole world watching. And so as the judge got ready to hear the initial testimonies, the burden of history rested on all of them in that room. This was not merely the trial of Kody Brown. This was the trial of every shattered promise, every financial affront, every bitter word, every tear cried in secret. Christine, Janelle, and Meri were not merely claiming money. They were not merely claiming property. They were claiming justice. And justice was finally within grasp in this courtroom. The courtroom fell silent, the tension becoming suffocating. After all the family gatherings, reality TV admissions, and hushed arguments behind doors, the truth was about to be uttered, not cut for the sake of television, not concealed behind Kody's charisma, but sworn in before a judge, where every statement counted. Christine was the first to testify. She moved slowly, her shoulders square, her chin up, but you could see it, the pressure of years upon her. She wasn't here as the smiling woman that viewers had come to know, mixing bread in her kitchen. She was here as a woman who'd been broken, discarded, and left to piece herself back together again. She placed her right hand upon the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat. The courtroom held its collective breath. Christine started gently, but her words sliced like glass. She talked of early times, of having faith in Kody's vision of family, of giving heart and soul to the dream of oneness. And then her voice broke, and the hurt leaked out. I wasted years being invisible, she said, her eyes welling up. I fed dozens. I raised children. I supported him at every turn. But when I needed love, when I needed a partner, he was not there. He said to me that I wasn't enough. He convinced me I was the issue. But I wasn't. It was him. He had already decided who was most important. And it wasn't me. Gasps were heard within the room. Kody shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenching. Christine went on. She explained the nights she cried quietly. The nights when her children inquired as to why their father did not care. She explained the night when it hit her, that she could not continue, that she was better than that her children were better than that. But she didn't stop. Christine presented documents, financial statements, investments she had made, donations to Coyote Pass. She set out evidence that she had invested in the future of the family, money that Kody attempted to take for himself after she departed. This isn't about property, Christine stated firmly now. It's about fairness. It's about justice. I gave everything, and he attempted to leave me with nothing. The courtroom was speechless. Christine's testimony wasn't only tearful, it was incriminating. Then Janelle testified. While Christine's testimony was driven by heartbreak, Janelle's was driven by reason and fact. She was not sentimental. She was methodical, calculated, the way she had always been. She talked of years of sacrifice, of getting jobs and making sacrifices in order to keep the family afloat. While Kody was fantasizing about creating an empire, Janelle was the one paying the bills, ensuring the family could make it. I put money into properties, she explained, holding up receipts. I invested in land that was supposed to belong to all of us. I trusted him when he said it was for the future, for our children. But instead, he tried to erase my contributions. He wanted to claim it all as his own. He wanted me to walk away with nothing. After decades of sacrifice. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't shake. It was firm like a hammer falling repeatedly. She stared right at the judge. I am not asking for favors. I am asking for what is mine. I am asking for acknowledgement of what I provided this family. Even Kody seemed shook. He had always depicted Janelle as down to earth, as mellow, as someone who never caused trouble. But there she sat, her tranquility biting harder than any rage-filled tantrum ever could have. Then Meri appeared. The room became silent as she made her way to the stand. For years she was the silent one, the overlooked one. She had been embarrassed on television, dismissed by Kody in front of millions of people. Others doubted she would ever fight for herself. But today she did. Her tone was smooth initially, but there was a bit of steel beneath. I was the first wife, she said, matter-of-factly. I built that family with him. I believed in him. I believed in us. And then one day, he came to me and asked me for a divorce. Not because he didn't love me, but because he wanted to marry Robin. He said it was for the family, that it was for the children. I believed him. I agreed. And at that moment, I lost the only thing I had. My status as his legal wife. And what did I receive in exchange? Public embarrassment. He declared to the world he didn't love me. He called the marriage over. I hung around for years, hoping, pleading for crumbs of affection. But I received nothing. Nothing. She teared up, but didn't shed a tear. Instead, she looked at Kody, her voice escalating. You used me, Kody. You used my loyalty, trust, and love. And when you no longer needed me, you threw me away like trash. And now you want to take what little I still have? No, no more. The courtroom gasped. Some cried. Others shook their heads in amazement. Meri had been silent for years, but now she spoke, and her testimony bore the weight of decades. Next was Kody. He walked up to the stand with the same airs that viewers had witnessed on TV. His voice was boisterous, aggressive, angry. These women are lying, he asserted. I sacrificed everything to this family. I constructed this family. None of this would happen without me. They're bitter. They're jealous. They've turned against me because they cannot endure the truth. He spoke louder, jabbing fingers, insisting that he had sacrificed as well, that he had labored for decades to support. He stated the wives were embellishing, distorting the tale to portray him as bad. But the more that he talked, the more the courtroom realized what Christine, Janelle, and Meri had been saying all along. His rage wasn't strength. It was pride. His denial wasn't truth. It was arrogance. At one point, the judge cut him off. Mr. Brown, this is not a reality show. This is a courtroom. You are under oath. Answer the questions directly. Kody stuttered, his voice shaking. For the first time, the man who'd held center stage for so long seemed trapped. The witnesses were finished, but the courtroom crackled with tension. Everyone knew enough to realize this wasn't merely about real estate or cash. This was about distrust. It was about responsibility. Christine had spoken from the heart, Janelle with reason, Meri with integrity. All three had painted a portrait of a man who had failed them, not only as a husband, but also as a partner, as a father, as a leader. In Kody's defense, it had fallen apart in the face of his own pride. The courtroom was charged with electricity. All the testimony had been given. All the accusations, all the denials, all the tears, and all the angry words now sat heavy in the silence. The crowd of people sat immobile, waiting. Cameras snapped quietly, pens scribbled on paper, but no one ventured to speak above a whisper. This was the moment. The judge shuffled her papers, her face stern, her eyes cold and unyielding. She wasn't here for the sake of drama. She wasn't here to indulge in reasons. She was here to uphold justice. Order in the court, she announced bluntly. Her head raised, the buzz died immediately. And then, taking a deep breath, she started. Kody Brown. The judge's voice echoed loud, firm, ringing through all corners of the room. This court has heard attentively the testimony put before it. We have examined the documents, the evidence, and the finances. What I see before me is not simply a controversy over money or property. What I see before me is a history of years of manipulation, neglect, and betrayal. Gasps of shock trickled through the courtroom. Christine clutched Janelle's hand firmly. Meri stood with her chin held high, ready for what lay ahead. The judge fixed her attention squarely on Kody, her eyes scrunched up, steel-like sharpness to them. You presented to the world a man of unity, a husband to more than one wife, a father to more than a dozen children. You said this was about love, fairness, and equality. But what this court has witnessed is not unity, but division. Not fairness, but favoritism. Not equality, but exploitation. Kody fidgeted in his seat, lips clenching, nostrils widening. But the judge didn't relent. She went on. Christine Brown sacrificed her youth, her faith, and her money to a marriage that made her invisible, overlooked, and unsupported. She offered undeniable proof of contributions to family property, contributions you tried to attribute as exclusively your own. Janelle Brown gave up years of her life, toiling to bring stability, investing in real estate and business on the understanding that they were for everyone. And then you did not keep that promise. You tried to erase her work and sacrifice. And Meri Brown, the original wife, the lawful wife, had been coaxed into divorce through the guise of law, only to be cast aside, embarrassed in public, and denied credit for a lifetime of devotion and care. Her words pounded like a hammer, with each sentence. Each hesitation weighted more than the previous one. The judge's voice grew tighter still. What I see here, Mr. Brown, is a pattern of control, manipulation, and disrespect towards the women who placed their lives in your hands. This is not a failure of marriage. It is a failure of integrity, a failure of fairness, a failure of responsibility. Christine's eyes welled up with tears, though they were tears of vindication, not tears of sadness. Janelle shut her eyes for the space of an instant, allowing the words to roll over her like a wave of long-awaited reprieve. Meri, stone cold, remained fixed on the judge, refusing to crack. But Kody, his face was flushed now, his mouth a little agape. He glanced around the courtroom as though he looked for someone, anyone, to stand up for him. But no one did. Not Robin, not the public, not the cameras. He had no one. The judge smoothed her papers, her words final. By order of this court, Christine Brown, Janelle Brown, and Meri Brown are declared the rightful owners of the family's communally held properties, including parcels of Coyote Pass on which they all contributed financially. Additionally, this court decrees that financial recompense shall be made to each of them for unpaid contributions and sacrifices incurred throughout the course of these marriages. Gasps erupted around the room. Pencils flew as reporters wrote frantically. Christine placed her hands over her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Janelle reached out and grabbed her arm, squeezing hard, both women shaking with the severity of what they'd just heard. Meri let out a deep breath, a sound that seemed to free decades of emotional baggage. The judge wasn't finished. "As for you, Mr. Brown," she declared authoritatively, her gaze narrowing over him, "this court concludes that your own testimony is wanting in credibility. Your conduct, your evasions of responsibility, and your refusal to own up to responsibility are themselves accentuations of the very dynamics of neglect and control testified against you. You will have no further claim on the properties or possessions bequeathed to your previous wives. Take this ruling as a caution that any type of marriage cannot be established on exploitation." And she raised her gavel. Bang! It echoed like thunder. The courtroom exploded. Christine wept openly now, embracing Janelle as camera flashes filled the room. Meri brushed a tear from her cheek, but held her head high, her integrity unbroken. For the first time in years, the three women were not rivals, were not sister wives, fighting for love. They were allies. They were victors. Kody sat stunned, his lips agape in shock. His empire, his dominance, had just fallen before the world. He slumped back in his chair, his eyes crazy, his jaw shaking as the truth hit him. Robin, sitting in the back, covered her face with her hands. She had said nothing throughout most of the proceedings, but her shoulders now shook. Her tears dripped quietly as she understood what this meant. Their family, their security, their dream, it was all broken. Outside the courthouse, pandemonium erupted. Bubbling crowds of reporters pushed forward, microphones thrust into their faces, cameras clicking steadily. Fans applauded for Christine, Janelle and Meri, shouting out their names. Justice for the wives signs were held high. Christine emerged into sunlight first, wiping away her tears but smiling. Her statement was short but potent. This is freedom. This is justice. And this is the beginning of a new chapter. Janelle trailed behind, serene as always, her tone even. "I gave what I could for years. And today the court acknowledged that. I feel heard. I feel seen. That's all I ever needed." And Meri, usually quiet, spoke words that hushed the crowd. "I lost myself in that marriage. But today I found myself again." Kody trailed behind last, lawyers surrounding him, his countenance scrunched up with rage and embarrassment. Reporters yelled out questions. Fans jeered. Cameras followed every movement. He didn't say anything. He couldn't. His legacy had been rewritten by one verdict. The former mighty patriarch of Sister Wives now strode alone, bereft of the dominance he had held onto for decades. And within the courtroom itself, the reverberation of the judge's words still resonated. They weren't just a decision. They were a message. A statement that no matter how mighty one may seem, no matter how long one can stay above the law, justice has a way of catching up. For Meri, Christine and Janelle, it was more than a victory in court. It was closure. It was vindication. It was the last page of a book they had been stuck in long enough. And for Kody, it was the end of his kingdom, the end of his domination, the end of the illusion he constructed for television. Because in that courtroom, with one gavel strike, the judge didn't just deliver a verdict. She delivered justice. The echo of the gavel had passed, but its authority remained. The courtroom that was heavy with silence and tension was now a hub of voices, flashes and motion. The verdict had been uttered. Justice had been served. Christine, Janelle and Meri stood together as a united front that everyone in that room had ever witnessed. They were portrayed for years as rivals, sisters who were united by circumstance, not by choice. But today they weren't rivals. They weren't wives, fighting over crumbs of love. They were women who had battled a battle and emerged victorious. Christine clutched Janelle's hand, her tears flowing freely. "It's over," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's really over." Janelle squeezed her hand back. "Yes," she said firmly. "And we're free." Meri, who was only a step behind, didn't weep this time. She raised her chin instead, her eyes gleaming with something no one had ever looked at her with, in years, dignity. She had been belittled, dismissed and silenced for so many years. But today she walked out of that courtroom, not as Kody's forgotten wife, but as a woman who had reclaimed her dignity. Outside, the world was waiting. There were reporters everywhere. Cameras blinding. Fans screaming their names. The steps of the courthouse had become a stage. And for the first time in their lives, the spotlight wasn't shining on their sorrow. It was shining on their victory. Christine moved forward first, her voice firm even as her feelings shook beneath the surface. For years she told the crowd, looking out at them, we were instructed to remain silent. We were instructed to settle for less than we were owed. But today we were heard. Today the court handed us justice. And for that I am thankful. The audience cheered. Christine smiled as she cried, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Janelle then addressed the group. Always level-headed. Always the steady hand. Her voice conveyed peaceful strength. I gave everything I had to my family, she stated. I worked, I sacrificed. I invested in our future. And for many years I felt unseen. But today I am seen. I am heard. And that means everything. Reporters took furious notes, recording every statement. At last Meri moved forward. She hesitated, her gaze crossing the blue tide of cameras and faces. And then with soft strength, she spoke. I lost myself in that marriage. I gave and gave until there was nothing left of me. But today I take myself back. I am not forgotten. I am not discarded. I am free. Her statement quieted the crowd for a moment. And then the cheers erupted louder than before. And then Kody appeared. He came out of the courthouse with lawyers surrounding him. But no one could protect him from the tide of reporters and admirers gathered outside. Microphones pushed into his face. Cameras blindingly flashing. Voices calling out, Kody, do you regret it? Kody, what do you have to say to your wives now? Kody, is this the end of the Brown family? But Kody remained silent. His face was flushed with rage. His jaw set so hard it seemed it could break. He pushed through the crowd, his attorneys attempting to shoehorn reporters out of the way. But no matter how quickly he strode, he couldn't outrun reality. His empire was in ruins. His wives had triumphed, and the world watched. Robin lagged behind, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. She dodged the cameras, dodging the questions. Once the favorite wife, the one who had remained by Kody's side as the others dropped away. Now she too was helpless. The family she'd thought she'd built was gone. The ground she thought she stood on had shifted. For the wives, however, the future looked bright at last. Christine went back home to Utah, where her new lover David Woolley stood with open arms. As she fell into them, she felt the difference immediately. This was love. Love founded on respect and equality, not control and abandonment. She had found the happiness she'd been kept from for so long. Janelle, on the other hand, devoted her energy to establishing herself as an independent person. She appreciated the fact that the court had seen her sacrifices, that all the years she had worked were not in vain. She devoted herself to her children, to her career and to her own future, free at last from Kody's shadow. And Meri, though her journey was less raucous, was maybe the strongest change of all. She had been belittled the longest, ostracized the most, and yet she emerged with her head held high. For years she had been whom, by virtue of what Kody said about her. But now she was becoming a who. She started traveling, new businesses, reconnecting with herself. She wasn't Kody's wife anymore. She was just Meri, and that was all she needed. For Kody, though, the scene was starkly different. The man who once paraded across TV screens, boasting about his big family vision, now stood alone. His kingdom, founded on control, favoritism and manipulation, had fallen apart. 3 wives had abandoned him. 18 children were broken, many estranged. His reputation, once his boast, now lay in shambles. At home with Robin too, the silence was oppressive. She had thought she would be the sole survivor, the one who finally won his entire focus. Instead, she won the remnant of a shattered man, furious, resentful, and devoid of authority. The cameras outside had caught it all. The weeping of Christine, the courage of Janelle, the dignity of Meri, and the shame of Kody, and those pictures would live on forever in the public eye. But behind the cameras, behind the verdict, what counted most was what the women held with them. Freedom. Christine no longer needed to cry herself to sleep. Janelle no longer needed to struggle to be heard. Meri no longer begged for love. They entered the courtroom as ex-wives. They exited as survivors, as victors, as women who finally reclaimed what belonged to them. The judge's declaration still lingered in their heads. Marriage in any form cannot be built on exploitation. Those words weren't a verdict. They were a decree, a pronouncement that could never be undone. And for the viewers who had watched this family for years, it was not only drama on a reality TV show. It was closure. It was justice. It was the conclusion of a tale that had once been marketed as love, but had always rested on foundations. For in the end, the Brown family's tale wasn't about oneness. It wasn't about devotion. It wasn't even about polygamy. It was about power. And when that power was finally defied, when the women organized and fought back, they succeeded. The courthouse emptied as the masses dissipated. But the memory of that day would never disappear. It would be remembered as the day Christine, Janelle, and Meri took back their voice. The day they stood not as wives, not as competitors, but as equals. The day the judge brought down Kody Brown's empire in one gavel bang. And the day justice was finally at last served.